Meaningful progress made during 1945 to 1980 is human rights, especially rights of Black people. The civil rights movement is an umbrella term for the many varieties of activism that sought to secure full political, social, and economic rights for African Americans in the period from 1946 to 1968. This activism involved a diversity of approaches, bringing lawsuits in court, lobbying the federal government, to mass direct action, to Black power, with the fierce opposition of white supremacists. The civil rights movement did not suddenly appear out of nowhere in the 20th century. Efforts to improve the quality of life for African Americans are as old as the United States. From the age of slavery to Jim Crow, separate but equal. So, what made the civil rights movement go to the climax? Hundreds of thousands of African Americans served their country during World War II. They discovered that racial discrimination was not nearly as oppressive in European countries like Great Britain and France. For the first time, many people realized that the United States could become land without racial discrimination. Another reason is that some of African American veterans took advantage of GI Bill benefits, but still face employment discrimination. Many African American college graduates had to take jobs that they could have obtained without a 4-year college degree. Also, Black veterans were cautioned against wearing their uniforms in public, lest they project an unseemly sense of pride and dignity. Some people return to their hometown and find that white citizens even had organized a home guard to protect white women from Black veterans.
In the summer of 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till went to visit his great-uncle and cousins in the small town of Mississippi. Till was an African-American teenager who had grown up in Chicago. 3 days after, while Till entered the Bryant's grocery store to buy a pack of bubblegum, Carolyn Bryant, the white woman who was working behind the counter, told her husband that Till had a wolf whistled at her. 4 days later, he and his half-brother kidnapped Till from his uncle's house in the middle of the night. They tied his body to a large industrial fan and dumped him in the nearby river. But more than 50 years later, Bryant admitted that she fabricated this story and lied on the oath about their encounter. When Till's body was salvaged from the river 3 days later, he was recognizable only by the ring he wore. Trial for Till's kidnapping and murder began on September 22, 1955. But the result is that the all-white jury delivered a not guilty verdict in the case. Till's murder awakened Americans to the true extent of racism in the nation. More and more people started to join the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks, who would initiate the Montgomery bus boycott just 2 months after the trial, said that on that day, "I thought about Emmett Till, and I couldn't go back to the back of the bus." Rosa Parks, who would initiate the Montgomery bus boycott just 2 months after the trial, said that on that day, "I thought about Emmett Till, and I could not go back to the back of the bus." Rosa Parks was arrested on December 1, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama for failing to give her bus seat to white passengers. After this message and news were delivered to every Black people in this city, African American men, women, and children stopped taking the bus, and instead carpooled or walked to their destinations. A non-violent protest began. At that time, the boycott became major news as the nation's television networks, newspapers, and major news magazines covered it. With the precipitous decline in ridership, bus company revenues collapsed, while people started to resort to violence to stop this movement. Police dogs and high-pressure water hoses were used. During night, the outrage was very common while black people walked through areas, except black communities. But people didn't stop, since they have to stand out for their rights for their next generation. The boycott was a success. The 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection under the law ruled that segregated public buses were unconstitutional. Many of the elements in Montgomery bus boycott — organization, community solidarity, nonviolence, and the intervention of federal government — proved to be the groundwork on which the civil rights movement of the 1960s would be based. The Soviets used American racism to their advantage during the Cold War. Pitted against the United States in a global power struggle, the Soviet Union seized the opportunity to highlight segregation strength in its anti-American propaganda. The Kremlin spread word to people in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that they would be foolish to expect the American government to treat them any better than it did its own citizens of color. Countries on these continents were just gaining independence, and both superpowers wanted the countries on their side. Incidents like the attack on the Freedom Riders supported the civil rights point. The Kennedy administration stepped into the fray of civil rights. Cold War pressures helped force the federal government to finally do something about racism in the South. The civil rights movement was successful, with the federal government's passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. These two federal laws outlawed segregation, guaranteed African Americans equal protection under the law, and truly secured African American men and women the right to vote. However, the civil rights movement was not over.